Book nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. When Douglas T. Kenrick sets out to write Sex, Murder, and the Meaning of Life, he is not trying to offer the usual brand of self-help or philosophical speculation. Instead, he wants to take the insights of evolutionary psychology, a field often accused of being coldly reductionist or even cynical, and show how they illuminate everything from our most violent impulses to our deepest search for meaning. Kenrick's approach is part confessional, part scientific tour, and part irreverent storytelling. He takes the reader on a ride through the strange landscape of the evolved human mind, where mating strategies, fear of death, jealousy, prejudice, altruism, and even our loftiest spiritual yearnings all have roots in survival and reproduction. It is not a book that says humans are nothing more than gene-propagating machines. Rather, it suggests that to truly understand why we are the way we are, we must come to terms with the logic of natural selection, even when it makes us uncomfortable. From the beginning, Kenrick makes it clear that he is not writing as a detached academic. He peppers the book with stories from his own life, brushes with violence in gritty neighborhoods, awkward encounters in relationships, experiences with fear, and his candid admission that he has been haunted by some of the darker aspects of human behavior. These anecdotes are not meant to glorify or sensationalize, but to serve as reminders that evolutionary psychology is not abstract theory. It explains things we have all seen and felt. By weaving these stories with decades of scientific research, Kenrick grounds the science in lived experience. The heart of the book rests on the idea that our brains are not designed for rational truth-seeking in the philosophical sense. They are designed for survival and reproduction. Our cognitive biases, emotional reactions, and moral intuitions are the products of thousands of generations of ancestors who survived long enough to reproduce in a dangerous and competitive world. Seen from this perspective, even puzzling or destructive behaviors can make sense. Why do people murder? Why do they cheat? Why do they form prejudices against outsiders? Why do they risk everything for love or vengeance? Kenrick's answer is that these behaviors, while tragic in modern settings, are exaggerated echoes of strategies that once gave our ancestors an edge. One of the major themes Kenrick returns to is sex, which is no surprise given its centrality in evolutionary thinking. He describes in detail how men and women have different mating strategies shaped by the differing costs of reproduction. Women, for whom pregnancy is biologically expensive, have evolved to be choosy, weighing qualities such as resources, protection, and long-term stability. Men, on the other hand, often face reproductive success tied to the number of partners they can attract, which fuels risk-taking, competition, and sometimes reckless behavior. Kenrick doesn't reduce people to stereotypes, but shows how these tendencies manifest in subtle patterns. For instance, studies reveal that men are more likely to engage in conspicuous consumption, buying flashy cars or expensive goods, not out of pure enjoyment, but as an unconscious signal to potential mates. Women, too, may emphasize physical cues of health or fertility. These dynamics explain not just personal relationships, but consumer culture, media trends, and even political posturing. But sex also intersects with violence, and this is where the book takes its darker turns. Kenrick explores the psychology of murder, not to excuse it, but to show how aggression is one of the oldest tools in the evolutionary toolkit. Young men are disproportionately the perpetrators and victims of violence, and evolutionary psychology explains this as part of male competition. In ancestral environments, young men who successfully outcompete rivals could gain status and reproductive opportunities. The modern world still carries these echoes, though now they may play out in gang conflicts, bar fights, or even corporate rivalries. Kenrick relates stories of his own brushes with potentially lethal violence, using them to illustrate how deeply these primal forces run. Murder, in this framework, is an extreme misfiring of strategies that once offered survival benefits. Understanding it as such, he argues, doesn't make it less horrifying, but it does make it more comprehensible. The book doesn't stop at violence and sex, however. Kenrick also examines cooperation, kindness, and altruism, showing that these two have evolutionary roots. He challenges the simplistic view that evolution is only about selfishness. Yes, genes are selfish in the sense that they propagate themselves, but the strategies they produce can include profound cooperation, sacrifice, and empathy. Parents sacrifice for children because the children carry their genes. People cooperate with kin and even non-kin because in small groups, reputation and reciprocal favors ensured survival. Altruism, in other words, is not a contradiction of Darwinian thinking, but one of its most brilliant outcomes. When people help strangers, donate to charity, or risk themselves for a cause, they're expressing instincts that once kept groups together. Kenrick brings in examples of how these instincts sometimes backfire in modern society. Our evolved tendency to favor those who look or act like us can morph into prejudice, xenophobia, or racism when applied in diverse societies. Our instinct to hoard resources, once adaptive in environments of scarcity, can fuel greed and destructive economic systems in an age of abundance. Even our drive for status, which once secured survival and mating opportunities, now expresses itself in the endless chase for material possessions and social media validation. The mismatch between ancestral environments and modern conditions is a recurring motif. We are running ancient software on new hardware, and the glitches show up everywhere. At the same time, Kenrick wants to push back against the idea that evolutionary psychology is fatalistic. Recognizing that our minds were shaped by natural selection doesn't mean we are doomed to repeat destructive patterns. Instead, it offers a kind of manual for understanding our impulses. Once you know why you are tempted toward jealousy, greed, aggression, or reckless mating strategies, you can begin to resist them or redirect them. He frames this as a way of finding real meaning in life, not by denying our evolutionary heritage, but by becoming conscious of it and working with it. The book is full of colorful experiments that make the science come alive. For example, Kenrick describes research showing that when men are reminded of attractive women, their risk-taking behavior increases, whether in financial gambles or physical dares. This is not random foolishness, but a predictable shift triggered by mating cues. Similarly, he explains how subtle reminders of mortality can change our attitudes, making us cling more tightly to cultural values or react with hostility to outsiders. These are not quirks of individual personality, but deep, universal patterns of a human mind. One striking part of the book is Kenrick's exploration of parasites that manipulate their hosts, such as toxoplasmosis in rodents, which makes them less fearful of cats and thus more likely to be eaten, completing the parasite's life cycle. He uses these eerie biological examples to highlight how even behavior can be hijacked by genetic interests. This analogy extends to human culture. Ideologies, religions, and memes can be seen as parasitic in the way they spread and hijack minds, sometimes to the detriment of the individuals who carry them. Ideas, like organisms, are subject to selection pressures, and the most successful are not always the most truthful or beneficial, but the ones that spread most effectively. Kenrick also doesn't shy away from uncomfortable topics like infidelity, sexual jealousy, and mate guarding. These behaviors, often seen as moral failings or flaws of character, can be reframed as ancient strategies. Infidelity, for instance, may have been a way for women to secure genetic benefits from one partner while gaining resources from another, or for men to increase reproductive output without commitment. Jealousy, often destructive in modern relationships, evolved as a way to protect reproductive investment. Mate guarding, controlling or monitoring a partner, is not justified by this explanation, but it becomes understandable as an evolved tactic. By confronting these realities, Kenrick hopes to move beyond simplistic moralizing and toward a clearer-eyed understanding of human nature. Humor runs throughout the book, often dark but always self-aware. Kenrick knows that evolutionary psychology can sound like a grim catalog of selfish motives, so he lightens it with wit and candid stories. He also acknowledges criticisms of the field, such as accusations of genetic determinism or ignoring cultural factors. His response is that evolutionary psychology doesn't deny culture. It explains why certain cultural forms catch on, why some values resonate more than others, and why humans are capable of extraordinary variation within a universal framework of evolved instincts. Toward the end, Kenrick broadens the focus to the search for meaning itself. If everything from love to murder can be explained by Darwinian logic, does that drain life of significance? He argues the opposite. By understanding the evolutionary roots of our drives, we can better appreciate what it means to be human. The fact that love, art, morality, and spirituality can arise from a mind shaped by survival doesn't cheapen them. It makes them more remarkable. Our quest for meaning is itself an evolved trait, one that likely helped bind groups together and motivated individuals to persevere in the face of hardship. That doesn't make meaning an illusion. It makes it a product of the same forces that gave us life itself. The final message is both sobering and empowering. We are creatures shaped by ancient forces, full of impulses that can mislead us in modern settings. But we are also creatures capable of reflection, creativity, and choice. By recognizing the patterns of our evolutionary psychology, we can navigate modern challenges with greater wisdom. We can understand why we are drawn to destructive habits, why we fear outsiders, why we crave status, why we sometimes act against our long-term interests. And in understanding, we can begin to change. Sex, murder, and the meaning of life thus becomes more than a book about sex or murder. It is about what it means to live as a human being whose mind is the product of evolutionary pressures. It challenges the reader to confront uncomfortable truths, but also offers a kind of liberation. Meaning is not found in denying our nature, but in acknowledging it and then choosing how to channel it. Kenrick's blend of science, personal narrative, and humor makes this journey both unsettling and exhilarating. It is a book that insists we face ourselves honestly, and in doing so, it offers a deeper appreciation of what it means to be alive. And that's it. Douglas Kenrick's Sex, Murder, and the Meaning of Life. A psychologist investigates how evolution, cognition, and complexity are revolutionizing our view of human nature. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.